The last Perek, this is Yoshua's second Sicha, and unlike Perek Chaf Gimel, which was only to the leaders, Perek Chaf Dalet is Beferish to Kol Yisrael, all of the Jewish people, and I think we had started one point, the one point that I made was that here, unlike the first meeting where we're not given the place where it took place, we don't know where it was, the second convocation, specifically, the Navi emphasizes it was in Shechem. Now, Shechem is a town in the area of Ephraim, which is where Yeshua happens to live, Shevet Ephraim. But as I say, Shechem, you'll recall, might be a little bit of an odd choice. Shechem was normally not a place of convocation. And just to review, we were going over, the last thing we were doing when we mentioned this was that Shechem has a number of associations, some of which are positive and some of which are negative. Shechem was the place of Mechiras Yosef, number one. Shechem was the place of the rape of Dinah, abduction and rape of Dinah, number two. Shechem was the place of the massacre of the city by Shimon and Levi. And again, let me just remind you, although Yaakov was not happy about that, obviously. Yaakov was very upset that they killed the city. But you'll remember, and I think we talked about it more than once over a time, that the Rambam does say there was a halachic justification for what Shimon and Levi did, and he has a very interesting idea. We know that violation of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach is a Chiyuv Misa. Now, Shechem himself, the prince, the man Shechem, was guilty of kidnapping, and that's considered to be Geneva under the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So Shechem as a person was Vadai Chayiv Misa. Right, so that's not the question. But what's the justification of wiping out the whole city? So here the Rambam says the following. The seventh commandment of the Noachide law is a commandment that is called dinim, which is a very unclear term, dinim. The seventh commandment is called laws. What is the mitzvah of laws? So the Rambam says the mitzvah of dinim is that non-Jewish societies are commanded to set up a court system to enforce and punish violations of the Noachide laws. So the Rambam's argument is the following. The Rambam's argument is Shechem, the person, is guilty of violating a primary Noachide law by kidnapping, which is theft. But the entire city of Shechem is in violation of not creating a court system to punish that wrongdoing. And therefore, the Rambam says the failure to establish a court system will make them chayiv misa for violating. Now, it's a strange thing because obviously they wiped out man, woman, and child. I mean, what, is the 5-year-old or the 5-month-old is supposed to establish a court system? But the answer has to be that the chiyuv of the court system is on the community. So as a result, the community is chayav misa. We're not looking at individual people who appoint judges or whatever it is. So this is a tremendous chiddush of the Rambam, because what the Rambam is basically saying is the Rambam is justifying what we would call in modern terms vigilantism, when there's not a court system that is adjudicating Noachide wrongdoing. And basically, talk about take the law in your own hands. Hey, you're a Noachide, there's no court system that's judging you, so I'll kill you. I mean, even that's a chiddush. To say that I could kill the thief is a chiddush. But the Rambam is going further. I can kill the whole community that did not adjudicate the theft. This would have some very, very surprising implications regarding Arabs, regarding terrorists, and the like. I don't want to get into that. The last time a rabbi talked about that, the police were investigating him for inciting riots, so I don't want to get into that. But you see the problem here, because not only is the Rambam saying I could kill murderers who don't keep the laws of Bnei Noach, and I can do it on my own, but I could kill the community for not creating a mechanism for judging them. Big chiddush. The Ramban is cholek. The Ramban actually says that the din that a Noachide gets misa is only when a Noachide violates the Noachide laws with an action, But the omission of not making a court system is called the Shevi al Tasa, and therefore there is no Chiyuv Misa, and the Ramban has to go into other reasons for it. But be it as it may, that's not really our topic. So Shechem, again, has negative associations. Mechiras Yosef, abduction of Dinah, destruction of the city. It does have a positive association, and that is when Yaakov came from Eretz Yisrael, he actually purchased not the city of Shechem per se, but the area around Shechem. B'meya kesita. A kesita is like a coin. It actually records that he purchased it. And Shechem was where the Jewish people, or Yaakov's family and his servants, buried whatever avodah zaras they had taken from Lavan's house. They buried the avodah zaras, and Yaakov made a point that now that you're entering the land of holiness, you must distance yourself from all avodah zarah. So Shechem is a mixed bag, and of course Yosef is buried in Shechem, and Shechem as a city, Yaakov already said he gave to Yosef, meaning even though Shechem is located in Har Ephraim, the mountains of Ephraim, but even before the Geirel allocated that whole area to Shevet Ephraim, it was already known from Yaakov Avinu's time that Shechem would belong to Yosef. So even if, for example, counterfactually, the Geirel would have given that whole land up there to a different tribe, Shechem would have been an area that was miyuchad to Yosef. It happened to be, Hashem arranged it, that it would be located in Chelka Shel Ephraim, who of course is Yosef's son. So with all of these different factors that are percolating, why would Yehoshua make a decision that his last speech to Am Yisrael would be in Shechem? So there may be a few possibilities. One possibility is that since Yehoshua is calling upon them to repudiate idolatry, repudiate intermarriage with the Canaanites, etc., be separate from them, so he wants to recall the memory of Yaakov Avinu, calling on his family and his servants to separate from avodah zarah and separate from idolatry. And as I indicated, although the Torah only describes that event in one pasuk, but apparently it was a much more powerful event than we think about this. This was like a formal ceremony of repudiation, that there still was a collective memory. Another possibility might be to recall the destruction of Shechem. Remember, Shechem abducted Dinah, raped her, and then proposed, let's have a situation where we marry your daughters, you marry our daughters, etc. And maybe the remembering the massacre of Shechem is a reminder of how severe the prohibitions of intermarriage are. Don't connect. Right? So it's even calling to mind that association. A third idea might be that Shechem reminds us of the tragedies of Sinas Chinam and lack of Avas Yisrael, Mechiras Yosef. And therefore, indirectly, although Yeshua doesn't, it's interesting, the Teichen of Yeshua's talk is not so much about Achdus and Avas Yisrael. That's not the theme of what he's talking about. He's talking about idolatry and not intermarrying and the like. But it could be Derech Remes. Shechem makes people think about what happens when brethren hate each other and the tragedies that can come from Mechiras Yosef, right? So essentially, there may be three different reasons, and I think all of them might be true, why Shechem was the designated area for this. One is it calls to mind the repudiation of avodah zarah, going back to Yaakov's time. Number two, it reinforces the idea, the horrendousness of intermarriage and making a treaty, which is why Shimon and Levi acted the way they acted. And number three, it highlights, although this is not emphasized, I have to admit, in Yeshua's speech, but it highlights the need of achdus and unity and the great, great dangers to Klal Yisrael when there is sinas chinam, as we see from Mechiras Yosef, which actually resulted in the servitude in Mitzrayim in terms of all of those different events. So the meeting is in Shechem, and it does say in front of Hashem, And Chazal understand this to mean that the Aron HaKodesh was taken from the place, the Aron HaKodesh in Shiloh. Shiloh is where the Mishkan is. By the way, that's also in Har Ephraim. Right? The Mikdash is in the Chelek of Yehuda straddling Binyamin. Mishkan Shiloh is in Ephraim, but it got moved from Shiloh to Shechem. And even though we normally think, the Aron never gets moved, but the truth of the matter is, at least until the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the Aron would occasionally be taken out to war and various other occasions, and for various asifos. And now one would ask the question, well, who goes in? Meaning, if you remember the beginning of Sefer Yeshua by Yericho, when they were carrying the Aron and they stepped into the river, and the river split, the Yarden. So if you remember, the Navi says the Aron was carried by the Kaihanim, even though in the Midbar, the Aron was carried by the Leviim, B'nai Kahat. So you might recall, I don't want to go over this, that there was an interesting machlokes, Rambam and Ramban, where Rambam actually takes the position that only in the Midbar was the mitzvah of Nesias Aron, Bilavim, because there weren't that many Kohanim around. But as the number of Kohanim increases, the mitzvah changes and moves from Levim to Kohanim. So according to the Rambam, any time after we cross the Yarden, where the Aron HaKodesh is carried, it must always be carried by Kohanim and not Levim, because the mitzvah actually changed. It was manutak from the Leviim, and it went to the Kohanim. This is the Shitas HaRambam in who can carry the Aron HaKodesh. Ramban is cholek. Ramban says that the Oraisa, Kohanim or Leviim could carry, because remember, Nesias Aron was given to B'nai Kahas. It happens to be all Kohanim are also B'nai Kahas, and therefore Doraisa, a Kohen or a Levi could carry it. So yeah, most of the time we see Kohanim carrying it, but it's not because the mitzvah changed. Even in the Midbar, in theory, a Kohen has the status of a Levi to be B'nai Kahas. But be it as it may, whatever you say, whether a Levi could carry it, a Kohen could carry it, but who would go into the Kodesh HaKodashim to take the Aron out? If we have another rule that the only person who can enter the Kodesh HaKodashim is the Kohen Gadol. Did it have to be the Kohen Gadol? And what about the fact that it wasn't on Yom Kippur? As far as we know, this moving of the Aron did not take place on Yom Kippur. So the truth of the matter is, the rule of not going into the Kodesh HaKodashim is not as absolute as you might think. The rule would be any Kohen who was Tahor was allowed to enter the Kodesh HaKodashim if there was a tzorich, if there was a reason to do so, and retrieving the Aron or the Sefer Torah, whatever it would be, was considered to be a tzorich. So Einach Hinami, a Levi couldn't go in, because the Emes says a Levi can't even go into the Mishkan proper, the Heichal. It would have to be a Kohen, but it didn't have to be a Kohen Gadol under those circumstances. Okay, so now we're back to the Psukim. So Yehoshua is now addressing everybody, and starting with Pasuk Beis, you will see a few Psukim that, if you have a good memory, may sound very, very familiar to you, because these are Psukim that are actually read in the Haggadah Shel Pesach every year, every Seder. And it says, Pasuk Beis, Vayomer Yehoshua El Kol Ha'am. Yehoshua says to everybody, Kai, this is in the Haggadah, Kai Amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael. So says Hashem, the God of Israel, meaning Yehoshua seems to be quoting Hashem. You put quotation marks here, because it's written in first person. Be'aver HaNahar. So this is a little bit of a history. Be'aver HaNahar. On the other side of the river. Yashvu Avoseicha Me'olam. That is where your forefathers lived. Again, this is an interesting point. We are not natives of Eretz Yisrael. In a way, it almost, undermines our claim a little bit. We are not natives of Eretz Yisrael. We are from Aram. We are from the area of Syria, actually east of Syria. We are from the other side of the river, Mesopotamia. The river that is being referred to is the Euphrates River, the River Pras. That is where we are from. That's where Lavan lived and the like. Right? Aram Naharayim. Aram between the two rivers. What are the two rivers? The Tigris and the Euphrates. That's where we are from. So Yoshua is reminding them that your forefathers came from the other side of the river. So again, this is not the Yarden, this is the Euphrates. That's why Avraham is called, one of the names Avraham is called is Avraham Ha'ivri. Avraham, we say the Hebrew, but it comes from Aver Hanar, people from the other side of the river. That's why it's called Ivri. Now Chazal have a beautiful drasha though, a secondary connotation of the notion of Ivri, and it says that it refers to ideology and belief, not just geography, and that is, Avraham was so firm in his faith that the whole world could be standing on one side of a river, so to speak, against Hashem, idolatry, paganism, and Avraham was on the other side. So it's also an ideological gulf that a Jew has to understand that even if the whole world is moving in a different direction, you have to remain firm in your emunah, just as Avraham Avinu was firm in his emunah. But in this pasuk, it literally refers to the river. And in that place, starting with Terach, the father of Avraham, and the father of Nachor. So again, remember your Chumash a little bit. Terach had 3 sons: Avraham, Nachor, and Haran, with a Hey, Haran. Haran happened to be the father of Sarah. So Avraham married his niece. He calls it a sister because it is the daughter of his brother. That's why he called her his sister. Nachor, just to show you how there's a lot of intra-family marriage. Nachor was the father of Besuel, who was the father of Rivka, the father of Lavan. Lavan was the father of Rachel and Leah. So all 3 of Terach's sons go into the formation of the Jewish people. But the pasuk mentions here, Terach was the father of Avraham and Nachor. It does not mention the father of Haran. So if you recall, Chazal actually have a drasha that Haran died. He had Sarah, of course, Baruch Hashem, but he died young because of the incident at Ohr Somayach. Remember the Medrash? This is not in the Chumash. This is very, very amazing. In fact, Nechama Leibowitz, a frum woman who is a very renowned scholar and writer about Chumash, again, typically not studied in yeshivas, but that's okay. She was perfectly fine. So she tells the story that sometimes some stories are so familiar to people that we're absolutely sure they're in the Chumash. But they're not in the Chumash. These are midrashim that are part of our Masorah, but they're so well known that you literally think it's there. So she told the story. She used to give Chumash classes to people in the army, some of whom were from, some of whom were not from, but she would give Chumash classes to people in the army. So there was this old, gruff Israeli general. He was a general in the army. And he was not religious for many, 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 many years, but he had grown up in a religious home, and he had learned Chumash as a child. So she was just talking, and she was saying that sometimes we think stories are so familiar to us, we think they're in the Chumash, and they're not. And she gave an example of Avram being thrown into the fiery furnace. It's not in the Chumash. not there at all. The Rishonim asked the question why it's not there. So as she's talking, the gruff general says, I haven't opened the Chumash for 50 years, but of course the story is there. I heard it when I was, 7 years old. Yeah, of course it's in the Chumash. So she gave him a Tanakh and said, find me the story. He knew Hebrew, so that wasn't the problem. So he's leaping through it, looking for it. It's not there. So he says, don't give me a summary. Give me a full text. Imamish didn't believe it. But be it as it may, if you recall, the king at the time was the Russia, the Oved Avodah Zarah, Nimrod. And when Avram was caught breaking the idols, defacing his father's idols, Nimrod told Avram, you either accept Avodah Zarah or you're going to be thrown into a fiery furnace. And Avram Avinu said, I will die before I do Avodah Zarah. He was thrown into a fiery furnace, and he was saved. Chazal are merames to this. Ohr Kasdim. Avram comes from Ohr Kasdim. Now, in the Chumash, that's just given as a place. But Chazal darshan that the word Ohr can also mean a furnace, that he was saved from the furnace of Kasdim. So Haran then said, hey, me too. And as Haran didn't want to say what he believed in till he saw what happened to Avram. When he sees Avram getting saved, so Haran says, I believe in Hashem too. He gets thrown into the furnace. He gets burnt. Now, here's an interesting question. Did Haran get burnt because, like a punishment? He was a Russia because he didn't accept Hashem till he saw Avram being saved? The emes is no. Haran also gets schar for believing in Hashem. In a way, Haran did a righteous thing too. But Haran's type of emunah does not merit a supernatural miracle. Haran did not die because God was punishing him. Haran died because when you get thrown into a furnace, that tends to be what happens to you, unless you have a special merit to be zocheh to a miracle. Avram, who was willing to die, is zocheh to a nes. Because he was willing to die. He didn't know there was going to be a nes. Avram did not go in with the bitochain there would be a nes. Avram went in willing to die. Hashem will sometimes, not all the time there either, will do a nes. Haran also was a maimin b'Hashem. Haran said, I now believe in Hashem. Now I see that Hashem is true. But since he thought he would be saved, and he didn't affirm his belief until he saw that Avram was saved, he was not zeicha to a nes. But the Mefarshim say that is why he was zeicha to have Sorei Imenu. What a part of Klal Yisrael he is, because he was also a maimin b'Hashem. It's interesting. We don't know anything about Nachor being a maimin b'Hashem. I mean, Haran, we have at least a medrash that he was maimin. Nachor, we don't really know. Nachor seems to be an Oved Avodah Zarah. So maybe the reason why it doesn't mention Haran here is because Yoshua wants to portray the two pathways. There was Terach, that was an Oved Avodah Zarah. And then there was Nachor, who remained on the pathway of Terach. And there was Avraham, who chose the pathway of God. So we're not mentioning Haran because we're interested in the two extremes. Haran was a maimin, albeit an inferior way. So we're not mentioning him, but the two pathways. Yoshua is going to be discussing successive levels of branching out. The good road, the bad road. And it starts with Terach's children. Terach is the father of Nachor and the father of Avraham. Nachor remained an idolater. Avraham found his way to Hashem. And Hashem then says, because of Avraham's emunah, V'yekach es avichem es Avram mi'ever hanohar. I took your father Abraham from the other side of the Euphrates. V'olich oso b'chol eretz Canaan. And I carried him through the whole land of Canaan, promising him that this would be his land. V'harbeh saro. And I multiplied his seed. Now, of course, Avram only had 2 sons, but it means in terms of a future plan. And here, too, we have another branching. V'yetein loes Yitzchak. I gave him Yitzchak. So it's interesting. Avram actually had 2 sons. He had Yishmael from Hagar, and he had Yitzchak from Sarah. So again, kind of a repetition of the branching. There's Nachor and Avraham. Bad way, good way. There is Yishmael and Yitzchak. Again, bad way, good way. In Yitzchak, there is Yaakov and Esav. So the Musar in expressing it this way is Yoshua is saying, B'Shem Hashem, let's kind of stop the division of the roads here. Meaning, once you got Yaakov, and once you have a Klal Yisrael, the idea is not to have good road and bad road. The branching off is supposed to be finished. This is the nation of God. All of Yaakov's children are expected to be one nation, serving Hashem. Yeah, there were branches off. Nachor branched off. Yishmael branched off. Esav branched off. But no more branching off. This is the final fruition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plan. And it says, I gave to Yitzchak Yaakov and Esav. Esav got Mount Seir. That's the area of Esav, which is south of the Negev. It's around northern Saudi Arabia, is Edomite territory. So Esav got Mount Seir, and Yaakov and his children went down to Mitzrayim. Without giving you the whole story, but through Mechiras Yosef and the like. And then it goes on and says, I sent Moshe and Aaron. So that's the end of the Haggadah, meaning to say the passage of the Haggadah ends with Yaakov Ubanav Yardu Mitzrayim. Okay, that's in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. Actually, the Brisker Rav is Masbir. The language of the pasuk is, I gave Esav Mount Seir to inherit, and Yaakov Ubanav Yardu Mitzrayim, that in ways we don't fully understand. The Avdus of Mitzrayim was the purchase price that needed to be paid to be Kona Eretz Yisrael. So Esav was not a slave in Mitzrayim because Esav got Mount Seir. But if Yaakov is going to get Eretz Yisrael, there has to be the Golus Mitzrayim, which is described as a fiery furnace of persecution. Now, when the Haggadah quotes these psukim, there's a prefatory sentence. Mitchila ovdei avodah zara hayu avoseinu. Originally, our forefathers were ovdei avodah zara. V'achshav, but now, keiravnu hamakom li'avoidasai, God has brought us near to his service. Then shenemar, and then it quotes these psukim, kayamar Hashem be'ever hanahar, Yeshua Shechem eyalim. But it begins, the Haggadah begins with the sentence, mitchila avdei avodah zara hayu avoseinu. So they tell a cute maisa with Rabbi Yitzchak Chanan Spector. Rabbi Yitzchak Chanan Spector, in the end of the 19th century, was considered to be the Gadol Hador. He was the Paisek Hador. In a generation of many, many Gedolim, he was the Paisek Hador. He was the Asken Hador. He took achrayas for yeshivos, for tzedakah. He was involved in everything. YU is actually named that. Yeah, YU is officially called Yeshivas Rebbe Yitzchak Elchanan. It's named after Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. Rav Yitzchak Elchanan was not a Rosh Yeshiva. He was the Rav of Kovna, but he was the Gadol Hador in everything. Ad Kedei Kach, that they tell a story, it may be a legendary story, I don't know if it's 100% true, that Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, who was the deepest of the thinkers, the Amkan and Maimek, Rav Chaim, very, very deep and analytical. But Rav Chaim hated to paskin. Rav Chaim was the Rav of Brisk. He hated to paskin shilas for whatever reason. There are different reasons, because a paisek has to defer a lot to precedent. You're looking at what earlier poskim have said. Rav Chaim's mind was creative and independent, and he couldn't necessarily bend to earlier paiskim, but he didn't want to paskin not like the earlier paiskim. So his attitude always was, ask somebody else. He was the Rav of Brisk. I mean, his job was to answer shilas, but he actually didn't want to do it. He didn't want to answer halachic shilas. Probably the reason is for what I said. So, who would Rav Chaim ask a shilas to? I mean, it has to be a pretty big gadol. So he asked many shilas of Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, and when he would send a shilah to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, the story goes, and it may be a story. He said to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, just tell me usher or mutter. Please don't give me any reasons. Don't tell me why. Just don't give me any reasons. Interesting. I wish I would get an email like that. Okay. So I don't have your reasons. Anyway, so the thing is that here's what Rav Chaim is supposed to have said. He says, you are the Paisek Hador. So you have siyata dishmaya to come to the right answer, to be mechaven li'emes. But your thought processes, I might not agree with. I have a different derech of learning. I have a different way of analyzing things. So I can't be makabel the way you think. But I still am maimin that your results are going to be right, even if I don't agree with your reasoning. Interesting thing. In other words, sometimes the Paisek Hador is given siyata dishmaya to be mechaven to emes, even if his reason is wrong. His reason is wrong because we're human and our reasoning can be fallible, but Hashem is not going to allow the Paisek to be machshel klal Yisrael. So the story actually goes that he told you, I'll accept whatever you say, just don't give me the reason. Okay, I'm bringing this up just for another little story involving Mitchila Avodah Zarah. Among the many challenges, and there were many, many challenges Rav Yitzchak Elchanan faced, was the rise of Haskalah, the rise of Jews who were more involved in secular culture and the like, some of whom were Shomer Shabbos, many of whom were not Shomer Shabbos, and many of the traditions were being attacked. Besides the Russian persecution, these were Jews who were attacking things. They weren't reform, per se, because, they either kept mitzvahs or didn't. There was no concept of reform, that they weren't gairis. But intellectually, these were challenges in Judaism. So people go to Yitzchak Elchanan and say, why don't you live with the times? Why are you so old-fashioned? Why don't you acknowledge progress of humanity? So Yitzchak Elchanan said to the Maskilim, he says, it's you guys that are the old-fashioned ones. We are the progressives and we are the innovators. He says, what do you mean? How can you say we're old-fashioned? He says, well, it says in the Haggadah, Mitchila of the Avodah Zarah, our original origin was idolatry. You just have a new idolatry, culture and the like. So really, we're the innovators because we repudiated our original orientation. You're going back to the original orientation. You're Mitchila of the Avodah Zarah, hayu abayseinu. Okay. So that's just a Maisa they say with Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. Another Maisa, I'll just end with, and then we'll go by to next week, is just an interesting, again, when you mention a tzaddik, it's maybe kedai to talk a little bit about him, especially since Yitzchak Elchanan is not mentioned so much today, and we don't realize how important he was to the Jews of Russia in particular, Russia and Lithuania. Whenever, God forbid, there was a Talmud who was drafted, it was always a matter of great concern, because in the Russian army, you could stay there for years, the Tsarist armies, years and years and years and years and years. There was no accommodation for being from. Many who went either died or they left Yiddishkeit or became crazy or whatever it was. So there were great efforts made to free anyone that was drafted into the Russian army. And they tell him, I said, when one of his Talmidim was Meshuchrer, and he was given the news that this Talmud is freed, he was Somayach. He said, oh, Baruch Hashem, and thank you for giving me the news. So the story goes that on one given day, 100 different people gave him the same news. Over and over again, the same story. And every time, in order that the person shouldn't be hurt, because I come in and I give you good news, and you tell me, I heard it already 10 times, so I feel a little embarrassed. He wanted each person to have the joy of being the first one that gave him the news. And only later they figured out that, hey, 100 people told him the same news, and they weren't margish. So that's an important idea of a toiv leiv, such a good heart, that you don't even want to tell somebody, I knew that already. Sometimes you give a person joy that he's the one that's giving you the news. So it's also a midah taiva to keep in mind. Okay, we'll stop here.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.